In scene 7, Bonnie is planting flowers, which is mentioned in the previous scene, which makes me feel like they're set about a few months apart. In this scene, a child comes into it and talks to Bonnie. So Bonnie's probably in her front garden next to the road, and the child's like standing on the road. I had to think about Bonnie's reaction to children, because even though the child is company and they can be quite fun to talk to, she also has quite an aversion to children, because later on you find out she gets sterilised because she doesn't want to have one. Therefore, there has to be something between children and her that just don't quite work. And she may have some sort of feelings towards them that aren't particularly expressed as such, but she has them in her mind. So I definitely had to think about that when doing this scene, because I couldn't just act normally towards the child, because that wouldn't be true to Bonnie and what happens in the future. The child's first line is radiant. This connects to in Carol's scene when Emma says radiant in scene 5, and then later when Jamie says radiant to Anna in scene 6. This is her connection to her mother and grandmother. So this line is very important towards her. Bonnie wouldn't necessarily know everything about the word radiant in her past, but I feel like she might know at least partially because she was brought up with Jamie. Jamie might have mentioned it at some point because Jamie knew that Anna's aunt said it. So I feel like she'd know a little bit about the word, but not have that strong a connection to it. So when the child says radiant, I had to think about what Bonnie would do. And I was thinking maybe either smile, because it is a compliment when a child is saying that your flowers are radiant, or smile but in a sort of sad way because it's a word that connects to her family, and that's not something that she meets very often. Bonnie often replies, at the least at the beginning, in very simple answers, usually only 1 or 2 words. This could mean that she possibly doesn't want a conversation with the child, and that she just wants the child to walk past and not take much notice in her. This could also link back to the fact that Bonnie has an aversion to children and possibly doesn't want to relate to them as much. Bonnie then says, "Do you?" when the child asks, "Do you have any children?" This is a very weird question to ask a child, because you'd never expect a child to have children because they're too young. But Bonnie asks it, so it could either mean that she isn't paying attention much to what the child is saying, or she doesn't recognise that the child is as young as she is, or she's just possibly just having fun and asking if the child is quite a young child and just playing about with her. Bonnie goes on to say that she sort of lives there. This is a very weird answer to whether she lives there or not, because while she owns it and she says that she sleeps there quite often, it means that she doesn't want to relate to it, or doesn't want to associate to that house as much as she might possibly be associated to it. So her response of "I sort of live here" definitely tells us and the audience that she doesn't see herself living there for very long, or see herself staying in that house at all once she's done it up. The child says, "Are you trespassing?" which I had to think about the way Bonnie would react, because Bonnie's answer is just no. However, if the child is quite young, the way that we've made her, it could be quite impressive that the child knows the word trespassing. So to show that, I added a little bit of a pause before the answer and have a little bit of a smile, as if the child is very clever and she recognises that and can relate to it because she herself is also quite smart. The next three questions that the child has, Bonnie either nods or shakes her head to. And I was thinking about why she might do this. One of my thoughts was that she was drinking tea at the time and that's why she couldn't speak. But that didn't really seem to fit that much, because even though she had the cup of tea, I don't think she'd just drink from it randomly during a conversation and then not actually talk. But I feel like what it actually is that it's her not wanting to speak and answer these questions in words. So she finds a way to answer them honestly, but not truthfully. Because one of them is, this is your house as well, and Bonnie nods. I feel like this is because Bonnie, while knowing that it is her house and she owns it, she still doesn't want to associate to it. So instead of using her words, she just nods. And it's her way of saying, yes, it is, but I don't want it to be, almost. Later on, Bonnie says all the things that she's found in the house. The first two are relatively normal: crayon on walls and stains on floorboards. The crayon on walls is a fairly typical thing to find in a house that's had children in it. Stains on floorboards is slightly different, because it could either mean about Anna when she committed suicide in the bath, or it could link back to scene 1 with Carol. And even though it was in a different house, it very much feels like it is in the same house, and it does throughout the entire thing. So it could almost relate, even though it isn't directly caused because of scene 1, it could relate back to it. And then she goes on to say family. This was a very important line, because you wouldn't think that you wouldn't believe in family even though you've been told about it, and you wouldn't have thought that you'd find it in a house that no one's lived in for a while. So I definitely had to think about that and the way I'd say it with tone and whether to put emphasis on it and all that sort of stuff. Eventually I decided to add a pause before and after that word, and definitely try to explore it in the way I used the tone and the way I said it, as if she was only just realising then what she actually found within the house. Because I feel like if you don't, then it wouldn't really give the effect that I wanted it to give upon the audience. After that, there's quite a long pause when we made the child come down and help Bonnie plant the flowers, and then Bonnie randomly out of the blue says, "I'm thinking of getting a rabbit." I think she said this because she's possibly uncomfortable with the silence with the child, because the child is probably quite content in this silence. I feel like Bonnie very much isn't, because she doesn't want to associate with children at all or relate to them. So saying that is almost carrying on the conversation and getting it closer to the end that she wants it to be at. Because she wants the child to go, but she doesn't want to be very mean about saying it. So to give the child a reason to go, she adds more conversation to eventually get to a point where they can say goodbye. Once the child had left, there was a few pages when Bonnie doesn't do anything and there's no direction to it. So I had to think about what she would do within that, and whether the interaction between her and the child could affect what she'd be doing. For example, whether she would carry on with just planting the flowers normally, stop planting completely and just look out and think about what's just happened and the things that she's found within the house, such as family, or whether it'd be a bit of both. I tried to begin with to start off with completely paying attention to the house and what she just found and holding onto the mug, looking down within it and just thinking. But then I got told fairly soon after that that wasn't what he wanted, and what I should be doing is just planting normally and not acting as if anything's happened. But I disagree with what I was told, because I don't think Bonnie would plant normally after. I think she would really think about what just happened and what she's just discovered, because she has just discovered that she's found family within a house that she never thought she would, and she barely even knew about until fairly recently. So I kind of went halfway in between and still made her plant flowers normally to begin with, but then slowly get slower and just before the end take off gloves or stop planting and just really think about what happened and what might be happening in the future for her.